Evening. I call to order the Board of Education meeting for Tuesday, January 11th. Please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
The next item is the approval of the agenda.
Motion to approve the agenda?
Second.
All those in favor? Aye. That's 8-0. Thank you. Next up is the John H. Crowder Award. The late John H. Crowder spent more than 30 years serving the children of Union County. As a living tribute to him and his legacy, the Union County Board of Education awards the John H. Crowder Service Award every month to an outstanding high school student who is making a difference in their school and community. Students who receive this award are not only academically successful, but also have an established history of community service. Tonight, we award the John H. Crowder Service Award for January to a junior at South Providence School. Tyler Oakley has made great strides since starting at South Providence School. He took his first art class last year and found it to be a positive outlet for his feelings and expressing himself. He is now focused on school and understands the importance of getting an education. He is committed to keeping his grades up and passing all of his classes. Tyler also shows strong empathy toward his peers. He has learned from his own life and knows the importance of helping others when they are feeling down. Tyler frequently notice when his peers are distressed before others observe the situation. He is good at listening to students and helping them feel better. If he feels it is serious, he will talk to a student about going to an adult. Tyler often becomes a class ambassador of goodwill. He can help diffuse a negative situation with humor or bring a peer out of their shell. He is the first to share what he has and enjoys giving to others. He is always pleasant and mannerly to staff and helps them to find a reason to smile each day. Tyler often assists staff around the buildings with any needs they have, whether it is carrying items to class or helping in the classroom. Outside of school, Tyler has worked at his church barbecue to help raise money for mission trips by delivering meals to church members. Tyler also works with his youth group to prepare backpack snacks for needy children in the community. He has also participated in a yard cleanup for the elderly, organized by his youth group. Tyler also helps his grandmother with yard work and other tasks. Recently, Tyler volunteered at Samaritan's Purse and filled shoebox for Operation Christmas Child. South Providence is very proud that Tyler Oakley is the recipient of this award. Board members, please join me in congratulating Tyler Oakley as the January 2022 recipient of the John H. Crowder Service Award. Congratulations. Great job. Keep it up. Next up is recognitions, influencers.
Good evening. We are super excited to bring back the UCPS Influencers Employee Recognition Program. We started the program in December 2019, and it was interrupted by COVID. The Influencers Program celebrates the passion, dedication, and hard work of UCPS employees. Each month, staff members, students, families, and community members nominate a UCPS employee to be recognized for positive influences they've had on our district. Last month, more than 100 nominations were submitted to the UCPS Influencers Award. Tonight, I am honored to present our UCPS Influencers for January 2022. Weddington High School Band Director, Mallory Norton, and After-School Program Coordinator at Shallow Valley Elementary, Veronica Weathers. I now invite the nominators to the podium to read submissions to recognize our honorees' accomplishments.
Good evening. I am Eliza Hacker, a student at Weddington High School. Ms. Norton, will you please come forward? Ms. Norton came into this band this year and that had not won a competition in over 5 years and had not only made us a winning band, but helped bring us a spirit back to a band that was never really there before. In the morning, her office can be a place where anything from boomwhacker choir rehearsal to an intense discussion of modern literature. She's always accepting of everyone, no matter what their history is, and she continues to pursue excellence and make a band the best thing it can be.
Good evening. I'm Colin Moore and the Assistant Superintendent of Administration and Operations. Excuse me. Mrs. Weathers, will you please come forward? I am reading this nomination on behalf of a former UCPS employee. Mrs. Veronica Weathers inspires me for several reasons. Mrs. Weathers takes her position as a UCPS ASP coordinator seriously. She puts the safety and care of her children in the after-school program above anything else. Not only does she have a passion for the children in the program by making sure that she advocates for them tirelessly, but for her staff also. She knows how to effectively collaborate with administrators in order to create a seamless working environment for the children and staff of the after-school program, which is very important. But not only in the ASP program does she work hard. Mrs. Weathers is also a volunteer in the local community programs and in surrounding areas. Everyone is important to her. She loves to help others. She has a passion and gift to lead and create leaders. She honestly models the desired behavior that she wants to see at her site and within the ASP program. I love how she teaches her kids to express themselves in positive ways by allowing them to engage with her in fun, meaningful conversations and storytelling. This shows her support and acceptance of the children, and it also teaches them how to reciprocate. Mrs. Weathers is a dedicated leader, teacher, and nurturer whom rarely, if ever, is heard to complain about personal, job, or other issues. She sets the stage for her site with a big smile, laughter, and a big heart. It was a real pleasure to work with her.
All right, I will now read the UCPS Influencers Proclamation from the Board of Education and Dr. Houlihan. Whereas the Union County Board of Education values the hard work of each employee within the district. Whereas performance is an essential part of district operations. Whereas Mallory Norton and Veronica Weathers exemplify the performance, dedication, and teamwork essential to the success of the district and its students. Now, therefore, the Board of Education for Union County Public Schools and Dr. Andrew G. Houlihan, Superintendent, hereby proclaim Mallory Norton and Veronica Weathers as the UCPS Influencers for the month of January 2022. Congratulations on this outstanding honor, and thank you for all you do each and every day to be a positive influence. Thank you.
Congratulations. Thank you very much. Next up is Mr. McCraw for Lifesavers recognitions.
Thank you, Ms. Heintel. Good evening, board members, Dr. Houlihan, Piedmont High School staff, and Deputy Balk, if you would, come on up. Board members, this evening I have the pleasure of presenting the Lifesaver recognition to Piedmont High School principal and staff and Deputy Christy Balcom, the SRO at Piedmont High School. Every day when students arrive at UCPS schools, our staff, our SROs, they must be prepared. This includes teaching, it includes learning, it also includes for emergency events. On December the 8th, 2021, Deputy Christy Balcom was on campus at Piedmont High School. She observed a student collapse during a cardiovascular related medical emergency. Deputy Balcom immediately used her training to evaluate the student's condition along with our retired nurse now, Tracy Hamilton. Deputy Balcom and Nurse Hamilton found the student had no pulse and the student was not breathing either. Deputy Balcom and Nurse Hamilton began CPR and applied an AED to the student's body. Approximately 3 rounds of chest compressions were administered to the student along with rescue breathing. During CPR, Deputy Balcom and Nurse Hamilton were joined by teacher Chad Balcom. He is the PHS Fire Academy instructor, and Coach Jeff Jenkins. They assisted with, they administered chest compressions along with Deputy Balcom and Nurse Hamilton. Principal Stamey and teacher Aaron Braswell and Mandy Smith also assisted during the emergency event. Aaron Braswell could not be here tonight. During the rescue efforts, the AED advised that on 2 separate occasions of defibrillation was needed. Once the AED was utilized, Deputy Balcom and UCPS staff on scene were able to determine the student's pulse had returned and also noticed that he was breathing on his own. They saved his life. Union EMS arrived shortly after being called and transported the student to a local hospital for further medical treatment. I'm happy to report tonight that student is recovering well, continuing to recover after his medical treatment, and he grows stronger every day. Y'all saved his life. What a job. The student has returned to school and he's doing well. I would like to commend the Piedmont High School team of Principal Dylan Stamey, retired, our nurse Tracy Hamilton, who can come back anytime she wants. She's wonderful. Chad Balcom, Jeff Jenkins, Aaron Braswell, and Mandy Smith. And Union County Sheriff's Office SRO at Piedmont High School, Christy Balcom, on their life-saving efforts in that situation on December the 8th. I'm thankful for the continued support of our school resource officers and the continued partnership with Union County Sheriff's Office and Sheriff Eddie Cathy and Chief Gilliard as well. I would like to commend them. Please give them a hand, and we have an award for them. Step back here.
Next up is public comments. At every regular meeting of the board, up to 60 minutes has been allotted for public comments. The board will not respond to public comments. However, a member may ask that the chair obtain clarification. Residents, parents, students, and employees of the district will receive priority on the list of speakers. If a speaker is not present when his or her name is called, the opportunity to speak will be considered waived. Only persons signed up may speak. Speakers may not give their time to another person or have someone else speak on their behalf. Individuals may address the board for a maximum of 3 minutes. Any person who is appointed representative for a group may address the board for a maximum of 5 minutes. A representative must state his or her affiliation prior to speaking or will be assigned 3-minute comment period. The board will not hear in open session complaints about the performance of school personnel issues, confidential student issues. Should a speaker wish to seek information or share items that may not be shared during public comments, our staff are available to address your concerns or provide information. Dr. Brad Breedlove, Chief Academic Officer, Dr. Bashan Harris, Assistant Superintendent for Human Resources, and Jared McCraw, Assistant Superintendent of Student Services, are here to assist. And bear with me because I'm not good at names. So, first up, Deb Helps.
Good evening. And I apologize in advance because I appreciate all of the sacrifice and I appreciate every single one of you. But I'm standing here before you tonight more frustrated than I have ever been in my life. I've written multiple speeches for this meeting, and I can't seem to get one finished between the toolkit changes. And then I finished it up last night. I woke up this morning. The first thing I see, the toolkit changed again overnight. And it's frustrating. And I've gone back and I've listened to my previous speeches for the past 8 months, and there have been 2 topics that I have addressed with this board: masks and the toolkit. I am sick and tired of reading the toolkit. I am sick and tired of having to worry every single day that masks are going to be mandated and my child is going to miss her education because of that. I am sick and tired of these bureaucrats in Raleigh trying to tell us that what works 300 miles away in Carteret County is going to work the same here in Union County, and it's going to work the same all the way to the west over in Henderson County. I am very thankful that the Board of Education and the Board of County Commission and the Union County Public Health Director came to the joint resolution, which is on the new state health director's desk, waiting for his decision on January the 19th, so that we can just walk away from some of the ridiculous requirements of the toolkit. The ever-changing rules, the discrimination between the vaxxed, the unvaxxed, the boosted, the unboosted, and the 15 different scenarios that they lay out in regards to quarantine, exclusion. It's all just word salad. It is ridiculous and unnecessary. And we have to accept the fact that COVID is in our society, just like the flu, just like norovirus, and we have to deal with it and move on with our lives. We have beat this poor dead horse, and even a dead horse has his limits. It's time to put down the stick, pick up a match, and burn the toolkit. It's over. We have to get back to personal responsibility in our society. We cannot continue to let these elected bureaucrats and appointed health directors who are so out of touch with the real world stop letting them have such a negative effect on our children and their mental health and their education. There was an article last week. A teacher in Houston took her child to get a COVID test. And when he came back positive, she put him in the trunk of the car to begin his quarantine. People are so scared of a disease that has such a high survival rate. There are therapeutics available. Medication is available. You can get as many vaccines and boosters as you want to get. We have to move forward. But this particular mother was so fearful that she completely ignored, because I have to believe somewhere in her motherly instinct was telling her putting your child in the trunk of a car is not a good idea. And she ignored that voice. This mother will not ignore that voice. What is being done to our children is wrong. We cannot continue to allow it. We cannot leave those who created the problem in charge of the solution.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next up is Stacey Swanson. You have 3 minutes.
Hi. Good evening. Now, I'm going to admit that I am coming to you here tonight completely exhausted because I stayed up too late watching that national championship football game and my Bulldogs won. I am wearing my red and black. I am a proud alum of the Bulldog Nation. I have literally, and I mean it seriously, waited my entire life for that team, for that team to win. So go Dogs, I'm here. And I'm sure there's a few of us that have also watched that game. But the victory aside, I'm also tired in some other ways. I'm tired of COVID. I am tired of the anxiety that I feel opening up an impactful cases email from my child's school. At least 359 impactful cases in UCPS students yesterday alone, including 20 at Porter Ridge Middle, 23 cases each at Marvin Ridge Middle and High, 22 more cases at Cuthbertson High, and 26 at Weddington Middle School yesterday. I am tired of seeing UCPS parents share these concerns over social media, this collective concern about sending children to school. And I'm especially tired of seeing elected officials and candidates refuse to answer questions, delete and hide comments on social media, and not reply to emails. I am tired of feeling like there is a deliberate lack of information being provided regarding health and safety of students and staff. And frankly, I'm a little tired of being here. I can think of a dozen other places that I would rather be, and yet here I am, some average person who cares enough about other people to show up. Today, there are 29 staff members and counting out at Monroe Middle School alone. How much will it take to change course? So here I am. The thing is, I know I'm not the only one who's tired. So to parents and community members tuning in tonight, the people sitting before me do not have the power you do. You have the power of the pen, writing emails of your concerns and continuing to demand communication from elected officials and candidates. You have your voice. If you are tired, please sign up to speak here next month on February 1st. Speaking here is your right as a parent and citizen of Union County. The registration for the February meeting begins at 10 a.m. tomorrow morning. And you can create your account right now at publicmeetings.ucps.k12.nc.us. And lastly, you can vote for candidates that have the best interests of your children at heart. Please register to vote for May midterms and show up in November and make your voice heard, because you, the parents and the citizens of Union County, have the power
Thank
to
you very
affect
much.
change. Thank you.
Next up is Nose Harrigan. You have 3 minutes.
Thank you. Did you guys catch the new episode of the Strong Schools Toolkit that aired yesterday? This is like season 2, episode 6 of a terrible show that should have been canceled after the pilot. This thing reads like it's written by Pfizer's marketing team. This entire document is designed to coerce vaccine compliance, a vaccine that is, 1, not needed for healthy children, 2, has a short-term risk profile that isn't looking so great, 3, has a long-term risk profile that's totally unknown, and 4, is extremely unpopular among parents. The toolkit states vaccination is currently the leading public health prevention strategy to end the COVID-19 pandemic. Well, here's a question from FDA's FAQ website. If a person has received the Pfizer vaccine, will the vaccine protect against transmission of SARS-CoV-2? The answer: while it is hoped that this will be the case, the scientific community does not yet know if the Pfizer COVID-19 vaccine will reduce such transmission. How is a vaccine going to end the pandemic if it cannot prevent transmission of the virus responsible for the pandemic? The toolkit also allows a vaccinated student who is exposed to return to school immediately, whereas an unvaccinated one has to isolate for 5 days. By excluding unvaccinated students from school and rewarding vaccinated ones, you are by extension coercing families to make a medical care decision. The Parents' Bill of Rights, number 4, says parents have the right to make medical care decisions on behalf of their children. What use is the right to make a decision if you are then punished for exercising that decision? That is a form of extortion. None of this makes sense. The only explanation I've seen anyone give is that children need to be vaccinated in order to prevent spread to older people. Well, we know that the vaccine doesn't prevent spread, and even if it did, this would be essentially borrowing against the health of children to give to older adults. It entails giving a risky treatment to a kid so that an older person can live longer. No healthy society sacrifices the well-being of its children for its elderly. I think we all hope the Omicron would end the madness since it's basically a bad cold. But unfortunately, I think it's more likely that the pandemic will end once it ceases to be useful to those who benefit from it, and not a day sooner. I have no doubt that they can stretch this thing out another year or two. It's time to end it. Lead by example and follow through on the December 7th county resolution, which said that the pandemic is unlikely to end, and asked the state to end contact tracing and quarantine policies in public schools. Lead the way back to common sense the way we did last year. Disregard the toolkit, end the contact tracing and quarantine, and return to the health policy we've used for decades. You don't need an expert to tell you if you're sick, stay home and come back to school when you're fever-free without medication for 24 hours. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up is Melissa Philanowitz.
I'd like to share with you a Jewish story from the Midrash. I think it's relevant to our current situation. This story tells of some people traveling in a boat. One of them takes out a drill and begins to drill a hole under his seat through the hull of the boat. The other passengers see this, and naturally they object. But he replies that he's staying in his own space and they should mind their own business. Why would this man do something so harmful to himself and others? Well, maybe he was hungry and he wanted to fish. Maybe he was dirty or hot and he wanted water to wash or cool himself. He may have some really legitimate and logical reasons, and he's doing what he has to meet his needs. There's no reason to think he's trying to be harmful. Of course, this man's actions will negatively affect not only himself, but everyone on the boat. And isn't it much of the same when we take any action when we're part of a community? Whether you feel COVID is real or fake, serious or trivial, I think we can all agree that it's been disruptive to our lives. I think we can all also agree that we want our kids to be happy, healthy, and learning in school. Further, we want UCPS to retain stellar educators so it will continue to be an excellent school system. Right now, more UCPS students are out of school with COVID than at any other time this school year or last. This doesn't include quarantine, just active cases. And the same is true for faculty and staff. Masks can help mitigate this surge. Are they perfect? No. But neither are seatbelts, bike helmets, or smoke detectors. Does anybody want to wear them? Never know anybody I've ever met. But I think we can all agree we'd like things to be normal. Unfortunately, normal isn't the boat that we're in right now. It's not normal for so many kids to be sick at the same time. While most of our kids will be fine if they get COVID, when they get COVID, some won't. Moreover, they will share COVID with their adult loved ones who will have higher rates of serious and long-term illness. So many children have already lost so much. I don't want our kids to lose loved ones to a disease that we can do something about. Just like the traveler in the boat whose actions affect those traveling with him, your actions affect all of us and our greater community. And I'm asking you to do what you can do. Require masks. Make sure we're quarantining properly. Don't force our principals to put our kids in the cafeteria.
Thank you very much. Next up is Trisha Rana. You have 3 minutes.
Some experts and a lot of parents have always maintained that COVID would eventually morph into a seasonal cold-like virus as the world develops immunity through natural infection. And thankfully, the emergence of the highly mutated Omicron variant has sped that process up. With Omicron being less deadly than the seasonal flu, we need to stop voting on masks each month and let society, especially our schools, return to normal. In the words of Dr. Leanna Wen from CNN, cloth masks are little more than facial decorations and should not be considered an acceptable form of face covering. According to CNN, the only acceptable masks are appropriately sized N95s and KN95s. According to the CDC, 60% of all KN95 respirators in the US, which are certified in China, are counterfeit and don't meet NIOSH requirements, yet claim to be certified on the packaging. The KN95s are far more accessible and cheaper, which makes them the more likely choice for uninformed parents. The KN95 costs about $1.30, with N95 costing closer to $2.60 per mask. That is an additional cost of $250 to $475 per single child family annually. While that doesn't sound like much to some people, that's a lot of money for a lot of families, especially those with multiple children. To mask 40,000 children for an entire year would cost over $10 million per year. Imagine if collectively parents had that much money to give to the school district for actual educational resources rather than masks that do not stop viruses. But more importantly, I'd like to discuss the study recently done at Brown University showing that COVID rules are to blame for creating a generation of children with lower IQs and deficient social skills. The report found there was a 23% drop in scores measuring kids' intelligence since the start of the scamdemic. The study also found similar dips in regards to developing children's ability to communicate both verbally and through subtle facial cues. In addition, masks worn in public in daycare settings may also impact a range of early developing skills. But the most disturbing piece of this study says that forced masking and social deprivation of children are showing effects similar to those of child abuse. And the children most at risk are the boys from poor backgrounds. For those of you still continuing to vote for masks, you have to realize by now you are doing more harm than good. Take a look at the parents that are double masked. This is what broken and damaged looks like. 2 years in, and with all we have learned, we still have parents going backwards. Ask yourselves, is this what you want for our children? Thank you.
Next, Kristin Smith of SOS Union County. You have 5 minutes.
Good evening. I appreciate the opportunity to speak to the board and the parents listening at home. As of yesterday, there were 370 impactful positive COVID cases here in Union County. That was in one day. Let me say that again, 370 positive cases in one day. Our previous high was 469 cases in 1 week. That was back during the Delta surge in August. And that surge resulted in over 7,000 students and staff in isolation and missing school. You, the Board of Education, has decided to no longer publish the COVID dashboard. So the true effects on our school system are now hidden from public view. So what are you doing to keep our kids in school? I and thousands of other parents want to know how many kids and teachers are sick or isolated from COVID exposures. We want to be able to choose what is best for our children, and this board keeps saying that parents' rights matter. Well, this parent wants transparency. This is my right to keep my child safe. If we are well above the all-time high of August, are there 7, 8, 9,000 students and teachers out? What is the threshold for shutting down our schools and going remote? Is there an official policy in place? Because there are literally hundreds of staff out daily, but there doesn't seem to be a plan, at least not one that's been communicated to parents. So who is teaching these kids when there are so few adults in the building? Who's keeping them safe when there aren't enough staff to watch over them? Obviously, learning is severely impacted when a third of the teachers are out, but what about literal safety? Who is protecting these kids, and why isn't a transparent policy in place to make decisions about when schools shut down or go remote? Why hasn't that been announced? Even Cabarrus County BOE today announced that masks will be required to try to slow the wave and keep kids in school. So what are you doing to keep our kids in school? Why, after your policy has proven to be a failure month after month, why aren't you changing it? Why aren't you requiring masks to keep our kids in school? Why aren't you publishing the dashboard so parents can make informed choices? Why do you think only your choices matter and ignore the thousands of parents and children that are being harmed by your policy? Mask optional isn't a choice for everyone. It's a choice for those who don't believe in masks to push their views and disease on those who do. Masks only work when everyone is wearing them. That is common sense. The person with COVID has to be masked to keep the germs out of the air. We have doctors that speak to you monthly about this, how they're overwhelmed, how the hospitals and doctors' offices can't keep up. And yet you still do nothing but add to their misery by allowing this disease to run rampant and unchecked throughout our schools. You show no regard for immunocompromised children or their parents. You show no regard for the parents that have to take off work because their children are a close contact to someone not wearing a mask. You never choose what is best for the students and what would keep them learning in person. You never choose to mitigate their exposure or reduce their chances of catching a potentially life-changing illness. You have heard from parents whose children caught COVID in UCPS, how those children are suffering the effects of long COVID, breathing treatments 4 times a day, nerve pain that keeps them from sleeping. But you never choose those kids. You keep choosing the parents who whine and complain about masks. So what are you doing to keep our kids safely in school? Why do you continuously put our children last and your personal agenda first? Because UCPS is on fire. This educational system is literally burning down around these students and teachers. You keep saying choice. Well, wearing masks would have kept kids in school. That's a fact. But you chose mask optional. You have chosen to force children out of school. You have chosen a policy that has kept 40,000 kids and teachers out of school and counting, all because you want to mandate masks and eliminate cumbersome contact tracing and quarantine burdens. You know what would help our overworked school nurses? Masks. Then they don't have to spend hours every day trying to figure out who maskless Timothy was sitting next to when he breathed COVID all over the place. You know what would keep teachers in schools? You guessed it, masks. The toolkit was updated to keep teachers in school if the kids are masked. Your choices matter, and your choices are hurting our children. Do the right thing already and mandate masks. Put a policy in place for when schools should go remote. Choose our children for once and stop listening to parents that don't have to suffer the repercussions of your choices. I want to know, what are you doing to keep our kids safely in school? Thank you.
Thank you. Maria Reed, you have 3 minutes.
Good evening, and thank you for the opportunity to speak tonight. One cannot infect another person unless one carries a live virus, and typically will not develop symptoms unless the viral load is high enough. As it pertains to PCR testing, even a microscopic viral load that is too low to cause symptoms can register as positive. And since the test cannot distinguish between live virus and dead virus debris, you may not even be carrying a live virus at all. These significant downsides are why PCR testing only should be done on symptomatic individuals after all the symptoms have been observed and taken into account. The test is to confirm the symptoms. All the currently available COVID tests are authorized under the Emergency Use Act, but they are not FDA approved. Any medical product, including vaccines and tests that are not fully FDA approved, cannot be mandated. Mandating these products is coercive, threatening, and illegal. Vaccinated individuals have the same chances of getting infected with COVID and spreading it as do unvaccinated. Why then are vaccinated individuals exempt from testing and unvaccinated are not? This is pure medical segregation. It is bullying, and it is unlawful. Any access privileges that are different than between the vaccinated and unvaccinated are illegal because it creates medical segregation. Mass violation of the law does not make it legal. Just because schools, businesses, and our government mandate these medical products, it does not make it legal. It's only buying time until proven illegal by the courts. Effective as of yesterday, Novant Health and Atrium Health have removed the weekly COVID testing requirement for their unvaccinated employees. Why? Because there are thousands of vaccinated nurses who are currently with COVID, and this information comes directly from Novant and Atrium medical staff. Why test unvaccinated asymptomatic employees when the majority of COVID cases are among the vaccinated employees? Even they finally admit it now. Likewise, excluding from schools vaccinated students, unvaccinated students and staff that have no symptoms but have been in proximity with the positive case is wrong and pointless. Having them tested only based on their vaccination status is unlawful. This medical segregation must end. Thank you and have a good night.
Next is Norm Perrault. You have 3 minutes.
Thanks for having me. A couple of months ago, I stood in front of you and discussed what's called confirmation bias, the idea that people naturally tend to search for, interpret, and favor information in a way that confirms their existing opinions. I asked you to set aside your previous notions and to be open to what the public is asking of you. I asked you to be open to the possibility that maybe, just maybe, a good way of ensuring that more students are able to receive in-person education is by requiring masks. That maybe, just maybe, critical race theory is not the existential threat that you imagine. that maybe, just maybe, school librarians aren't busy filling up their shelves with pornography, and that maybe, just maybe, when one parent exerts their rights, it ends up infringing upon the rights of other parents. Today, I'm not here to talk about confirmation bias. Instead, I want to talk about information and transparency. In the past, many of you have expressed how proud you are about how transparent and forthright the Board of Education has been throughout the pandemic. You pointed to test scores, to surveys, to dashboards. You've shown that more information and more transparency is a good thing. But over the past month, I've seen this district may take a step backwards in the area of transparency. By shutting down the dashboard, you made it impossible for parents to really understand what's happening in their schools. Parents have taken to crowdsourcing their information about student and staff infection, teacher absences, and about quarantines. Many of the people here want to give more power to the parents, but you're taking away information from those parents by taking away that dashboard. The last thing I wanted to talk about is the concept of willful blindness or willful ignorance. This term refers to the idea that sometimes people don't really want to know the truth. Because if you really know the truth, then you'll have to do something about it. If you really want to know the truth, then you're on the hook for fixing a problem. I'm concerned that you will be making decisions that run counter to the idea that more information and more transparency is a good thing. So please don't stick your heads in the sand. Instead, demand more information and more details from the schools and the county, and commit to sharing that information without exception to the public and to the parents. Thank you.
Next up is Steve Martin. You have 3 minutes.
Good evening. My name is Steve Martin, and I am the father of 3 daughters enrolled at Weddington Elementary School. In-person education, where students are physically in a classroom, interacting with teachers and their peers, is hands down the best education a child can get. Reverend Brenton, you've spoken passionately about this, and with that, I wholeheartedly agree. Especially for elementary students, being in person has made all the difference for my kindergarten and first grade students, children. But thousands of UCPS students have had their in-person education interrupted this year, every week, not because of the Department of Health or Mr. Joyner, but because of you, this board. You've made decisions thus far to prioritize your mask optional policy over keeping healthy kids in school. The toolkit is clear and has been clear and unchanging this entire year. In a mask mandatory school, students, staff who have been in close contact with someone with COVID-19 and don't have any symptoms do not have to quarantine. In a mask mandatory school, everyone is treated the same. Vaccinated and unvaccinated, people who have tested positive in the last 90 days and have recovered, people who have antibodies, people who don't have antibodies. Everyone is equal, and no one who is asymptomatic has to quarantine. School nurses can focus on sick students and not spend all their time contact tracing. And most importantly, especially during this period of uncontrolled community spread in this county, the schools, by being mask mandatory, are taking the easiest, most effective way to do their part to reduce the spread of COVID. At prior meetings, and again tonight, we've heard from several parents who support a mask optional policy as a matter of parents' rights. Here's the other side. If your child comes to school without a mask, and it turns out that your child has COVID-19, then the kid who sits next to your child, A, has been exposed to COVID-19 and may get sick, and B, has to quarantine, even if that kid was wearing a mask. I strongly support parental rights, but not when one parent's rights interrupts the education of someone else's kids. And that's what the mask optional policy does. You all have the power tonight to keep all healthy students in school right now. You can end the unnecessary disruption to our children's education tonight. When you adopted the mask optional policy on July 7th, there were 23 positive cases in the county that day. There were 23 positive cases at Marvin Ridge High School yesterday alone. We're not dealing with anything like the situation we had in July. Back then, our positivity rate in the county was under 5% and was controllable. Today, it's over 33, the highest it's ever been, and climbing. I ask you tonight, this doesn't have to be forever, it's from now until February 1. Require masks for the next 2 weeks Let's get this thing under control, reassess on February 1st. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up is Amy Youbill. Sorry, Youbill. You have 3 minutes.
I am here to share my breakthrough COVID story as an informative tale. My family is part of the UCP community with 2 daughters attending a Union County school, and thanks to their school's wonderful teachers, administration, and parent community, they have been helped through COVID. This is especially important as both of them are coping with having dyslexia and one having ADHD. Our daughters need to be in school because they need the face-to-face learning experience to help them grow and learn. Many families have one or more members that have hidden struggles that impact their family. My struggle is multiple sclerosis, and I must take immunosuppressant drugs to keep my body from attacking my brain and spinal cord. I was fully vaccinated in March 2021 and hope that even with a weakened immune system, the vaccine, as well as other precautions, would keep me from getting COVID. It didn't. On August 27th, which we will call day 1, I had a dry cough, and the next morning woke up with a fever and tested positive for COVID 1 week after school started. We immediately quarantined. On day 10, when my blood oxygen levels dropped, I was diagnosed with COVID pneumonia. 2 days later, I was admitted to the hospital. On day 13, I was upgraded to a high-flow cannula system to maintain oxygen levels. My right arm also went numb. While in the hospital, I received less than 30 minutes of human contact per day, spending the rest of the time in total isolation, listening to code blues and other patients screaming, especially at night. These cries included "let me out," and "I'm not ready to die," and left me with the stress and anxiety that continues to this day. Our concern was that I might not make it out of the hospital. It was here at my lowest point that Union County decided to stop contact tracing. My daughters cried every night because of my absence. After 16 days of hospitalization and 28 days of illness, I was able to come home on supplemental oxygen. On day 69, November 3rd, I came off supplemental oxygen. Today, day 138, my right hand is still numb and my hair is falling out. Please know that this virus is very real and to some of us very severe. The impacts of what you decide extends outside of school buildings and programs. People may be done with COVID, but it's not done with us. Thank you.
Dr. Patel, you're not on the list that was signed up for, so only the person that was signed up for UCPS physician parents was allowed to speak.
I was representing them today.
It wasn't signed up that way. When you sign up for a group, you can put more than one person on it, and there was only one person on it, to my knowledge.
So am I not going to be allotted the 5 minutes today?
You're not going to be allowed the allotted amount because you have to sign up with the speaker. We don't allow people to give their time to somebody else.
Okay. So basically, do I give up my right to speak today then? Is that what's happening here? Or?
Yes, you're not signed up to speak.
Okay. Thank you.
I apologize for the mix.
Policy? Can we see that?
I read it before the meeting. The opportunity to speak. Only person signed up may speak. Speakers may not give their time to another person or have someone speak on their behalf. Okay, next up, Jennifer Eckert, 3 minutes.
Good evening. Thank you for the opportunity, and a very special thanks to those of you on the board and the administration that are wearing masks tonight for my protection. Last month, I spoke to you about the hundreds of thousands of instructional hours that have been lost this school year for quarantined and isolated students. and the impact that is having on our community. I asked you to think about how many more hours you were willing to lose before you took actions to address the problem. You are leaders in this community. Leaders are faced with choices to make when situations become difficult. You can choose to face the problem head on. You can choose to ignore the problem and hope it goes away. Or even worse, you can take actions that make the problem worse. Every month, you have a global pandemic to examine and determine the best path to proceed. And as leaders, every month this school year, you have chosen to ignore it and continue with the status quo. And just when you knew things were going to get worse, you made the decision to try to hide it by no longer reporting the numbers of impactful cases and excluded students. The problem is, the problem didn't go away. In the past 7 days back to school, we've seen hundreds of impactful COVID cases in our schools, creating major issues with bus driver and school staff absences. We are at a point where the safety of our community and the education of our children are in jeopardy. Also, that you can tell yourselves that you kept the schools open. This is not conjecture. Let me share a few personal examples of the impacts your lack of action have had on my children in just the past 7 days. Let me start with buses. Because of bus driver shortages, some bus routes are being consolidated, like my daughter's. Her bus is so crowded, even with the absences this past week, children are standing in the aisles while the buses are driving down the road. Other buses are doing double routes. My son's morning bus has been designated as a second route, meaning that my son misses the first 20 to 30 minutes of his first period every day. Both of my children have substitutes for the majority of their classes and report that at least half their class has been absent every day. And it has already been brought to your attention by others that students are sitting in crowded cafeterias and auditoriums trying to complete work posted on Canvas because there are no teachers to provide instruction. Will you choose to continue ignoring this problem, or will you put the health and safety of our community and the quality of our education first? Thank you.
Next up is Brittany Bolden with Mom MFL. You have 5 minutes. Moms for Liberty.
Good evening. Can y'all hear me? I can never hear myself in that. I want to take a moment and thank you again for being a voice of reason during what is probably the largest peer pressure campaign in human history. I know it hasn't been easy, but doing the right thing rarely is. What crazy times we live in. A time when it seems impossible to know what is true. What do you do when it's hard to tell what is true? Well, I watch to see who and what are being censored. That is where the truth typically is. In the history of the world, a government who censors its people has never ended up being the good guy. And the people who stand up to said government, risking everything, are typically the truth tellers. You don't risk it all for a lie. The truth is, cloth and surgical masks don't work for a respiratory virus. They never did. Fauci and the government knew the whole time, and they lied. Now, almost 2 years later, they admit it after so much damage has been done, with us divided. The truth is that there are thousands of doctors who disagree with the approved narrative. Thousands of doctors who disagree with the approved narrative. Many of these doctors are highly credentialed, historically respected, at the top of their field, and even some Nobel Prize winning. These doctors are being canceled, vilified, losing their license and careers for the fatal flaw of having a highly educated difference of opinion. The truth is that actual science is supposed to be challenged and questioned. If you can't challenge and question it, then it's not science, it's propaganda. The truth is that Fauci has a 50-year history of being a horrific tyrant who has gotten away with overseeing medical atrocities on Black and Hispanic orphans in New York, women and children in Africa, beagle puppies, monkeys, and now the world's population. The truth is that an Indiana life insurance CEO says that deaths are up 40% among people ages 18 to 64. He stated that it was off the charts, unprecedented. That's right now, over 40%. The truth is that the vax doesn't keep you from getting or spreading COVID. The truth is that breakthrough cases is a weak attempt to rebrand vaccine failure. The truth is that there is data from the UK and Canada showing negative efficacy for the vax. Translation, it actually makes you more susceptible to getting COVID. The truth is that thousands of people died unnecessarily because the government suppressed successful early treatment with cheap drugs and the doctors. The truth is that ivermectin first started being used with humans in April 1978. The truth is that all the people who took the vax did not have informed consent, as Pfizer lied. One example, a girl became paralyzed for life from the vax, and Pfizer recorded it as abdominal discomfort and then kicked her out of the study before they unblinded it. The truth is that it isn't the only thing Pfizer was dishonest about. The truth is there were more reported deaths from this vax in the first 4 months than all other vaccines in the past 30 years combined. The truth is this vax is not safe or effective. The truth is that legacy media is captured and is now controlled by our government, big pharma, and big tech. Over the past 2 years, they have done nothing but act as a propaganda machine. Make no mistake, you will be complicit in all the harms done because you did not do your job, and following orders is no excuse. The truth is, Omicron is a cold. The vax offers minimal protection from it, and now Pfizer just announced that they will have a vax for Omicron in March. Y'all, they made a vax for a cold. The truth is that there's no stopping condition. As an example, the swine flu pandemic, 50 deaths, and it was stopped. We've passed that by a lot. The truth is, this was never a COVID pandemic. It was an installation of medical tyranny. Don't believe me? Talk to me after your 10th booster. The truth is, all of our medical institutions have lost all credibility. Even CNN called the CDC a punchline on the show last night. The truth is, we never needed a vaccine mandate. With Omicron, there's even less of a need for one. The fact that they still want to mandate vaccines should be a red flag for everyone, especially our children.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Next up is Sandra Green. No, wait, I'm sorry. Dan Auslander. Auslander, thank you.
Good evening, everyone. Good evening. To understand what I have to say, you should understand me and my family. I have 6th, 8th, and 10th graders at Cuthbertson. I am an airline pilot who works full-time to keep our economy moving. As a pilot, I make every decision from the perspective of risk management, and I understand that the popular choice may not be the best one. 2 of our UCPS students are immune compromised. My son has an autoimmune disease that impacts his joints and muscles. If infected, he would have a long, painful recovery and probably long-haul symptoms. For my daughter, the virus will impact her central nervous system. At best, she would have to relearn weeks or months of lost knowledge and have other memory deficits. She will have seizures, and she may end up in the hospital. It's possible that she will have lasting brain damage, or she could die. We also have a medically fragile senior citizen in our home. Despite these risks, my children are attending school in person, as this board has chosen not to offer the virtual learning option that was so helpful to many students last year. Even that didn't help everyone, as my son's required one-on-one instruction through his IEP was unavailable through the virtual option. As our elected leaders, this board has committed to the responsibility of protecting our children. The test positivity rate and infection count are the highest they have ever been in Union County, yet your actions ignore public health best practices. You demonstrate a lack of concern for the safety of our children and our community at large. We should be doing more, not less. If this board's concern is the workload produced by contact tracing, then do something to reduce the need in the first place. An indoor mask mandate would, by the requirements of the NC Strong Schools Toolkit reduce the need for contact tracing and quarantine significantly. The federal funds on offer for testing and support staff would also be a great help, but this board has chosen to go without. Last week, we had over 300 cases. We all took note because that was one of the highest weekly totals in the entire pandemic. Yesterday alone in the schools, we set a new record, breaking 350 cases in a single day. The move to indoors, wintertime, is making the situation more difficult. The fatalities have been and will continue to be our children, teachers, and community members. I urge you in the strongest possible terms to issue an indoor mask requirement, fully comply with the NC Strong Schools Toolkit, and take advantage of the available federal funded public health support measures. We all want our community to be safe. We want our kids to be able to stay in school where they have the best opportunity to learn, not sitting at home, counting quarantine days and waiting for test results. With proper mask usage, the quarantine requirements won't be nearly such a burden on our families. With additional testing and medical support staff, fewer children will be impacted and lose valuable learning time. Fewer adults will lose time at work, and fewer infections will mean less tragedy in our communities. Thank you.
Next is Sandra Green. You have 3 minutes.
Good evening. I want to start by saying that, like Deb and most of us here that came today, I'm so tired of the same robotic mainstream media talking points that some of these parents come up here with. To be honest, we are literally going on year 3 of 2 weeks to slow down the curve. Year 3, okay? The constant push and anger I see in some of these parents over here, I've heard from the other side, masks should be mandatory. The Union County Board of Education is killing our kids. The narrative is just not working anymore. It's done. If the tables were turned and Union County Board of Education said no one is allowed to wear a mask any longer in school, they would be up in arms. But that's not what Union County Board of Education has said. They have said masks will be up to the parents. We, the parents, have the right to choose whether or not to mask our children. That's a choice. That's okay. It seems that people have just been so brainwashed and programmed by the media and by the government that they need these things to run their lives and influence their decisions. The fear-mongering has got to stop. This virus has a 99% survival rate. That is greater than a survival rate than any other virus. In children ages 0 to 19, the survival rate is 99.9973. That's a mortality rate of 0.0027. I'm not saying that's okay. I'm just saying, but it's curable. I mean, it's okay. Kids are allowed to get sick. Remember when we used to get sick and we'd take chicken soup and we'd be fine? That's life. You get dirt. That's okay. Okay. Once again, the toolkit, which is insane, that was updated again last night, is now pushing vaccinations and boosters. Meanwhile, it's proven time and time again that the vaccinated people are still contracting COVID and transmitting it. This should not be a concern of the schools or the state for that matter. That is the choice of the parents to do. We need to stop letting government in Raleigh dictate to us here in Union County how to run our schools. We need to get rid of the toolkit. It is asinine. Contact tracing, quarantine, isolation of healthy children must stop. For instance, let me explain what I'm talking about here. This information I received today from my friend whose child goes to my daughter's school as well. This child was a 6-year-old was placed in quarantine this morning, a kindergartner. Upon arriving to school, was immediately sent to the office. At no point was the child notified that why they were being sent. He repeatedly asked why. He sat there for 3 hours, no Chromebook, no book, nothing to do to keep him occupied. Until all they told him was that your parents are going to come get you. But meanwhile, they put him in a room in isolation with 9 other kids who are quote unquote also quarantined. So you're just transmitting more of the disease. And I'm out of time, but that's what I wanted to say. And I just wanted to bring that up. And I thank you all for your time. And please make masks.
Thank you. Next, William How?
Good evening. Sandra took my icebreaker with the 2 weeks to slow the spread, so I'll avoid that one. I won't bring it back up. I just want to thank the board. I know we've heard these comments and people debating back and forth ad nauseum for 8, 9, however many months. And I know you're tired of it. Parents are tired of it. Some people nod off during the meeting. I mean, it happens. I mean, we're hearing the same thing over and over for the past 8 months. And, wish we could stop that, where it doesn't have to be discussed at every single meeting. There's definitely more important points that we want to discuss as far as education, the state of the schools, doing repairs. But alas, here we are debating masks and a virus yet again. So I'll just get on to what I've written here for you. So I do not recall if anyone has ever pointed out the obvious, but we can surmise that COVID is no longer about a virus or a disease that can be controlled with masks, vaccines, and the quarantine of the healthy. There are many in this room, which when I wrote this doesn't really apply now because they're all gone. I do not know their names, but can probably guess as they wear their masks of solidarity, which have to convince themselves on a daily basis that what they are doing is the right thing. They would rather say what they believe. Sorry. If they truly believed what they say they believe, they wouldn't even be here. They wouldn't gather outside in groups or sit in this room. They would stay locked up in their homes. They would not send their children to school. Instead, they should homeschool. They would not go to the mall, the movies, the grocery store, the gas station. They should have goods delivered to their homes, stream new movies, have telemed visits with their doctors, and remove themselves from any outside contact. The fact is, they cannot even bring themselves to believe the total outreach and nonsense being placed upon our everyday lives, and they only want to cope or dignify their decisions as they try and have others conform to their delusions. These are not people using logical thought, and these are the people that want to push for drastic changes in our school system to appease their delusions. These are people that want to run for the school board, and these are people that want to continue living a lie and have you believe that same lie. If their masks worked, they wouldn't push for vaccines. If their vaccines worked, which we now know they don't, they wouldn't need masks. And if they both worked, well, guess what? Life could continue as normal. If they wanted real solutions to combat any sickness or disease, they should revisit their comorbidities, such as obesity, diabetes, high blood pressure, their diet and exercise regimens. I applaud the majority of the board that they have stand firm on their decision and not swayed based on the court of public opinion. Kids need to be in school, kids will get sick, and if we continue to try and prevent both, our children will suffer long-term mentally, physically, and in their education. Thank you.
Here, close.
I don't even know what it is anymore. Hello, good evening, Board of Education. Good to see you guys again. Welcome to 2022. Okay, yes, I'm done. All right. Guess you didn't want to hear what I want to say, huh? All right. One of the things through this that's really heartbreaking is hearing the stories of vaccine injuries. I think we heard 2 of them tonight. I really do. And it's covered up. People don't want to say it. But I think it needs to be looked into. And parents need to be concerned and be warned about it. I've spoken a few times at the Human Services Board and the BOCC and asked them again, why is not one question asked of Dennis Joyner of the injuries from vaccines? Why are 20,000 deaths in VAERS being ignored? I don't understand that, but that's not what I'm here to talk about. I'm going to try to talk about some things that you haven't heard before. You heard last month that deaths in Union County, all-cause mortality went down in 2020 versus 2019. What wasn't shared was the actual number of COVID deaths in 2020 was 29, less than 1/3 of what the health department is reporting. So why aren't they reporting the truthful number? I looked at it myself. I looked at every single death certificate for 2020. Shocking. Here's what else is shocking about it. There was average age was 74. The youngest was 41. There were only 5 deaths under 60 years old. The data does not fit the narrative. One of the things I want to do, I'm going to switch a little bit here. A lot of people have talked about some of the things I want to talk about. So with all the money that's coming to you guys, I want to give you a recommendation how to spend it. If we really care about our children, why not do something that's going to have long-term health benefits for our kids? And that is, let's look at all of our cafeterias at every school and let's implement plant-based meals in our cafeterias. Why not? If you've seen the documentary Forks Over Knives, Dr. Colin Campbell and Dr. Caldwell Esselstyn, who both have over 30 years of research, concluded this. Animal-based diets turn on disease. Plant-based diets turn off disease. I watched that 3 years ago. I've been plant-based for 3 years. I can personally attest to the benefits that I've seen from it. But if everybody cares about our health of our children, let's put the money where our mouths are. Let's do this. Let's look at this. Let's investigate it. The other thing about this is the most damaging industry to our environment and also the largest carbon producer is not the transportation industry. It is animal agriculture. 80 billion cows wreak havoc on our land and water supplies, and they have to be fed. 54% of the world's crops go to feed livestock. It's time to start educating our children on the truth so they can have a chance to live disease-free. Thank you very much.
To do that, we have to start.
Welcome back. The next speaker is Cecilia Hu. Oh, I said it wrong, didn't I again? Sorry. You have 3 minutes. Thank you.
Happy New Year. First, thank you for your hard work during 2021. Oh, sorry. Thank you. Thank you for your hard work during 2021. Without a doubt, your continued support of the UCPS students, parents, and staff this new year. In spite of the highly contentious toolkit from the North Carolina DHHS, the blatant misinterpretation of the law by our own county's Health and Human Services when it comes to who can order a quarantine, and the onslaught of criticism from a minute group of individuals, despite all this, majority of you have championed for our children's best interests, supported individual choice, and helped preserve parental rights. So thank you for accurately representing your constituents. That said, today I come here to implore each of you once again to please stand on the side of logic, facts, and sensibility by making sure to resist any state mandates coming down the pipeline that would require UCPS to mandate COVID vaccination for its students and staff. By now, it's no secret that the goal behind the previous mask mandate has been to prime the public to be more pliable and cooperative when vaccine mandates begin to roll out. We simply cannot keep allowing politicians and bureaucrats to use our children as a means to their ends. It violates our children's constitutional rights, medical rights, and our rights as parents. Furthermore, I strongly urge the board to put in place a policy that would prevent the Union County DHHS from turning Union County public schools to COVID vaccination centers. This is not what we residents and stakeholder of this county who pay property taxes, which funds our school mainly, this is not what we signed up for. We have plenty of clinics and hospitals in the area that are more appropriate location for the dispensing of vaccines should individual want to procure them. These places have trained staff and equipment in the event that an emergency due to an acute adverse reaction to the vaccine takes place. Schools, on the other hand, don't. If schools become vaccines dispensaries and a student is injured, will the school and its administrative body assume responsibility? Who would be liable? Lastly, turning schools to vaccination center is clearly a power flex, an intimidation tactic against students and staff who have opted to not get vaccinated. Coupled with the already highly discriminatory toolkit, we now have that plainly shows preferential treatment of vaccinated students over unvaccinated ones. Turning schools to vaccination sites will further cause divide among student body and staff members. We already have strained dynamics in our school. Let's not add any more. The bottom line is this: our schools are a place of learning. They are not a satellite site for the CDC to conduct their experimental drug testing on, and they are not, most especially, doctor's office or pharmacy for vaccine companies to push their
Thank
products.
you very much.
Thank you.
The board is determined that Dr. Patel can speak. You have 5 minutes. In the future, people have to put the name of other people in the.
We do plan to. So thank
the
you so
group.
much, Ms.
Thank you.
Hantel. We really appreciate the opportunity. My name is Dr. Sandy Patel. I'm an internal medicine physician. I have a child currently in the UCPS system. I'm a member of a group of Union County physician parents who came together at the start of this year out of concern of the safety in our schools and our local community. And despite many of us being really at a breaking point, we're still here to help protect the health of the fellow community members, and as such will always be that unified force for that endeavor. Today, we will not rehash the history of COVID-19. However, it is common knowledge that this latest variant has metastasized through the world, this country, and has ripped through this state and into this county. And yet, this board remains eyes closed approach to all their decisions and all that is going on around them. And doing so does not afford solutions nor any proactive approaches. We're not saying that the school is the end-all, say-all in regards to COVID-19 infection rates and community transmission risk, but make no mistake, our schools represent a large part of our community and as such should play a central role in doing what is necessary to reduce that transmission risk throughout our county. All of us here today, regardless of politics and your thoughts about the pandemic at large, have the same common goals. We want our children in school safe, healthy, learning and interacting as much as possible. We want our teachers and school staff to come to a safe workplace every day and know that they are valued for the work that they do. We want this pandemic to end. We want restrictions lifted. We want the looming shadow of COVID-19 to disappear and become endemic. However, none of these actions to date have promoted these goals. This Board of Education has elected to eliminate their COVID-19 weekly dashboard. And we as a group cannot help but wonder, why would the board do this at such a time when we're facing the Omicron variant? What are you trying to hide? As we know very well that case counts are exponentially climbing in our schools, we need transparency. Doing away with the dashboard eliminates choice. You claim your decisions are centered around parental choice, but then parents need the dashboard information to make choices for their children. They need to be the ones to decide if it is safe for their child to return to school or not. We're also concerned with how this board consistently has cherry-picked the parts of the toolkit they wish to use. And why is that? Use all of the shoulds. There is no mask mandate made by the governor. Does that mean that we should not employ a mask mandate? This is a situation where coordination of what is happening in the local community should help drive that final decision. You have played to our constituents through a majority of the pandemic by keeping masks optional. What now if you play to your other constituents? And for 1 month, try it. There's no harm. And if anything, there's only benefit to be had for students, for staff, for teachers, and for the system at large. With masks, what about layered approaches? Physical distancing we know is impossible in our schools, and we understand that. What makes sense in addition to masking? Well, perhaps not holding mass events in a gymnasium where we have 200 students packed in there for an event, or perhaps hold off on communal dining in the cafeteria just for now. Space them out if you're going to do this. We want our children to participate, but we just need to make common sense decisions when it comes to these issues. What about offering and rendering testing? The toolkit clearly gives multiple instances where testing should be considered, and testing is being offered by the state to the schools. Yet this board has rejected that element of the toolkit as well. And what about the latest isolation and quarantine guidelines? This guideline will indeed keep students and teachers in the classroom much more frequently, but there have already been some concerning observations made. Parents are knowingly sending their COVID-positive children back into school, yet these children have not fulfilled any of the isolation requirements. Some do not mask their positive children at all, and we're also aware of siblings of infected students coming to school without reaching quarantine status. These instances would represent a violation in public health mandates. And as for returning after 5 days with this requirement to wear a mask for a subsequent 5 days, what is this board's plan for enforcement of this? And do you intend on following this guidance? Please offer us insight. With what many parents are witnessing in the schools at the present time, many children are still out of school, albeit for a truncated time frame. However, they're still not learning in person for those days. Teachers are out of the classroom, putting a lot of pressure on the substitutes and the staff in the buildings who are now trying to watch over larger and larger classes. And students are crowding into cafeterias when a teacher is not available, essentially having nothing but a study hall. Once again, a lack of live learning and a heightened risk of COVID-19. Now, do not assume that just because we do not have thousands of children passing away or having severe signs and symptoms means it's okay to get COVID. There are other ramifications. So in closing, as members of the local healthcare community, we make a plea. We request that this board, all parents in this county, come together. Let's stop bickering, let's stop arguing, and do our respective parts to aid in the transition out of this pandemic. In addition to employing lifestyle changes that lead to healthier immune systems, let's all employ high quality, appropriate use masking, get vaccinated, and get boosted. We are here for everyone as a resource if need be. We have common goals. Let's work for the common good. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you. The next item on the agenda is the approval of the minutes from December 7th, 2021. Mr.
So yeah, I actually have I noticed a change needed on them. Give me 1 second here. Should I wait for her to?
No, it's okay.
Okay.
So Donna's taking it.
Okay. On the vote for the masks, it does say the motion passed 8-1 with Joe Moriel opposing. I believe that was the Reverend Kirkpatrick. Other than that, I make a motion that we approve as amended.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. 8-0. Thank you very much. Next is the consent agenda.
Motion to approve the consent agenda. Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
That's 8-0. Thank you very much. Next is the superintendent report.
Thank you, Madam Vice Chair. Good evening, board, and good evening, Team UCPS. Welcome back, and Happy New Year, and happy 2022. We are very happy to be back and looking forward to starting the second semester of this school year soon. As we reflect on the first semester, I do want to talk for a brief moment about kind of some issues that we had last year and some challenges we had last semester and really get us very repositioned and poised to start the second semester off in a very good way. Much like school systems across the country, UCPS witnessed a higher level of discipline in our schools and discipline challenges than in past years. And I'd like to remind our students and parents about a few expectations as we move forward in the school year. Number one, we have a very strict code of conduct that will be enforced. I want to ask our students to please make good decisions when it comes to social media, how you react to conflict with your peers, and make sure that each and every day our schools are the safest they can be. Parents, please continue to partner with us on all things safety and work with your child's teacher and administrators in a positive manner. Secondly, please continue to use the Say Something anonymous reporting app. We have teams across the district who respond to all tips. We have a wonderful relationship with law enforcement. If you see something, please say something. And finally, we've also seen a dramatic uptick on mental health referrals. So to our students, if you need help or in crisis, please ask for help. We have experts in every school who are here for you and ready to assist you if needed. I also would like to give a few athletic updates. As we closed out the fall season, we had a lot of high school teams that made very successful playoffs run in every sport, highlighted by the women's cross country team from Cuthbertson with another state championship, and the women's tennis team from Marvin Ridge with another state championship. Moving into the winter season, we have a significant amount of teams that are poised for excellence at the state level. Currently, Weddington boys basketball is 14-0. They are ranked number 2 in the state in all classifications and number 1 in the Observer Sweet 16 poll. The Marvin Ridge men's and women's swim teams won the Southern Carolina Conference titles and should be a very strong contender at the state level. Women's basketball is heating up. It's a big shout out to Marvin Ridge, Forest Hills, and Parkwood, who are all off to tremendous starts. And finally, Cata and Parkwood have been dominant to this point in the season, and they will take on each other for the wrestling Rocky River Conference title this week. So good luck to all of our winter athletes and our soon-to-be spring athletes. And finally, I want to give a big shout out to a group of employees who make a huge difference to our children, to our teachers, to our staff each and every day. Those are our instructional assistants. They are a huge part of our district success, and I want each of them to know how much that we value and appreciate them. Thank you for your expertise, for your dedication, and for your support. That concludes my report. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next item is the audit presentation. Mr. Can you say it? Sapuric from Anderson, Smythe, and Waikiki. What? Did I do a good job? Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Adam Sapuric. I'm a partner with Anderson Smith Mike. We're the independent auditors firm that is hired by the board to conduct the audit of management. And I'm here tonight to present these financial statements. You should have been provided a copy electronically. The 75 pages of financial statements, very in-depth, all required. There's no extra information, but I'm here to kind of point out a couple of important numbers. Again, accounting standards require all of this information be presented, but I recommend that when you read through these statements, and we've talked about this before every year, there's really almost 2 sets of statements in here. There's the term fund balance. That's basically money in the bank. How much equity, available funds do we have for next year's budgets or future budgets? There's also incredible amounts of information on your net position. And again, this includes fund balance plus the value of your buildings minus the cost of these giant liabilities related to the state pension plan and the state retirement health benefit plan. So again, when you're reading through these, especially the first 10 pages, the management discussion and analysis, keep in mind that there is a true difference between what happens with your net position and what happens with your fund balance. So a couple of key pages here that kind of go over those, I think, most important numbers, the fund balance numbers. They really start at Exhibit 3 and 4 rather than Exhibit 1 and 2. 1 and 2 is really a statements on your net position. Again, we're hired to actually conduct the audit and give our opinion on these statements. The first page I wanted to point out is page 1. This is the independent audit report. The bottom of page 1 is the opinion paragraph of our opinion letter. It basically states that we believe that these financial statements are accurate. So this is what's considered a clean, unmodified opinion letter. After that, you have the MD&A, which again, like I said, has information on both some of the unique changes in net position as well as fund balance. But if you would turn to that Exhibit 3 on page 13, or scroll down to Exhibit 3, page 13, this is the balance sheet for your governmental funds. This is where we see your governmental fund balance. The first column of this balance sheet is your general fund, which houses the majority of your fund balance now. At the bottom of that first column, you can see that your total fund balance as of June 30, 2021 was $12,980,000. That's an increase of $10.9 million from the previous year. Of that $12.9 million, $9.4 million is unassigned. So you have $12 million, almost $13 million of fund balance. Some of it is restricted for encumbrances, basically payables that aren't payables yet. You issue purchase orders to buy items. There's those items have not been received as of year end, so that fund balance has to be set aside to cover those encumbered funds. So that's the $673,000. You also have $2.8 million assigned for local supplements. That is a management estimate of the amount of local funding required for the supplement as of the issuance of these statements. There's a lot of activity regarding supplements and bonuses, and I believe hiring and maintaining staff in the future becomes a competition for recruiting. And some of these bonuses or districts that offer signing bonuses or retention bonuses, this is going to become a common part of recruiting. And so you've set aside $2,860,000 of that $13 million for those supplements. Any questions on that makeup? Again, that's a significant increase in fund balance. We're seeing that across the state. COVID-19 has some cost savings in the form of vacancies. The district itself had also taken steps prior to this to reduce spending because your fund balance was so low. And that allowed you to capitalize on some of the federal funds received for COVID-19. You received this year coronavirus relief funds of $4.7 million and education stabilization funds of $3.8 million, totaling $8.5 million. So again, between those funds and some of the savings through vacancies and savings from pre-planned spending reductions, you were able to add that fund balance. There's also $9.6 million of fund balance in your other special revenue fund. Of that, $4.4 million is restricted for specific programs. There are certain state and federal programs that run through your quote unquote Fund 8, your other special revenue fund. Those funds have to be used directly within those programs, and so those are restricted funds. And you have $4.9 million that are somewhat available for spending on non-restricted purposes. You're only allowed to have one unassigned fund balance within that general fund. So any fund balance in any other fund is not considered unassigned. But that $4.9 million of other special revenue fund balance, it really is almost like unassigned fund balance. There are certain revenues that are not restricted, indirect cost received, some of your tuition and fees, sales tax refunds. Those aren't restricted, but they're in the other restricted revenue fund or other special revenue fund, and therefore they're automatically assigned for special revenues. You also have $2.2 million of fund balance and capital outlay and $4.3 million at the individual school level. After that, Exhibit 4, page 15, is the actual income statement for those governmental funds, showing you those changes in fund balance. Again, that first column being the most important, showing that $10.9 million increase in fund balance. You added $727,000 of fund balance in the other special revenue fund, and you used $3.8 million in the capital outlay fund. Your capital outlay fund balance is back to where it was back in 2018. Over the last several years, you've undertaken projects and plans to increase computers, one-to-one ratios, and those purchases of computers happen at year end when the students aren't using them. And so there have been several leases that have been entered into where you received the funds but didn't buy the computers until after year end. There was also a significant transfer from general to capital outlay to fund those future computer purchases. So the last 3 years, the fund balance in that capital outlay fund has been skewed based on timing. So really, as of June 30, 2021, that's really truly what's available for capital outlay. There were no timing differences on receipt of debt, basically, for leasing computers, and no outstanding purchases that were being paid for from transfers. So you're back to really where you are on a capital level where you've been for quite a few years, around that $2 million mark. So it's not unusual to use that, to see that $3.8 million decrease. That's just really several years of timing across the summer, finally flatlining and panning out right at June 30, 2021. After that, you have several schedules of those same governmental funds, budget versus actual. Those show no budget violations. Page 21, Exhibit 7, is another balance sheet for your two proprietary funds, your School Food Service Fund and your after-school program. Your after-school program is essentially $30,000 in the bank, really at zero. That fund or that program in a pandemic is just impossible to manage. And so all salaries paid out of that program, or most of the salaries paid out of that program, really had to be locally funded. So that program, as of June 30, 2021, has very little cash on hand. The School Food Service Fund, you actually have cash and investments. So when we look at those combined at the top of that column, that first column on page 21, totaled $3.8 million. I like to look at cash and investments on these funds because for your business type funds, fund balance actually equals net position. They're one and the same, whereas the governmental funds, they're different because those assets and liabilities that make these huge swings are not a part of governmental fund balance. But because this is a business type fund, the value of the kitchen equipment and the cost of their pension plan is directly on this balance sheet. So instead of looking at fund balance, which is net position, I really like to look at cash, because while you have a negative $8.5 million net position, you still have $3.8 million of cash and investments on hand. Now that is a big number, but it is still a decrease from the previous year. Prior year, you had $5.7 million of cash and investments on hand for a decrease of $1.9 million. Half of that is related to the indirect cost that child nutrition has been able to pay year after year for their fair share of the finance department, the HR department, their fair share of utilities. Last year, at year end, there was a $990,000 payable from the Child Nutrition Fund to the other special revenue fund for that indirect cost. The way you bill it after year end every year. And so there's been an ongoing, reoccurring $800,000 to $900,000 liability for the current year indirect cost, or the prior year indirect cost not yet paid. So this year, at year end, there was no indirect cost charged to child nutrition. They were not able to afford their fair share. And actually, the rules going forward won't allow you to charge indirect costs unless you have over 2 months of cash on hand, which you won't have. So that's a revenue stream of $1 million that was lost to the other special revenue fund, but it also represents half of that cash usage. You basically paid that payable and used $900,000 to pay that payable. The other $1 million of cash decrease is from operations. So when you look at page 22, Exhibit 8, this is an income statement for those two funds. You can see that your food sales were $939,000 this year. In 2020, food sales were $5 million. And in 2019, food sales were $6.6 million. Those food sales, the decline of $5 million, $6 million, were not replaced by your federal reimbursements. All kids ate for free, but you did not see an uptick in your federal reimbursements. Basically, the food that you were selling was not being recouped in the free meals. So that's a huge burden for that department or that fund to try to break even while missing out on $5 million, $6 million worth of sales. So while food costs, salaries all went down, it just wasn't enough to break even. And that's where you used about $1 million from operations of that
That's
fund.
across the state too?
It is.
Okay.
I have seen a wide variety. I have seen districts that have made millions of dollars and lost millions of dollars. It all is about the participation, getting meals in front of kids. And if a district that had previously been in the CEP program, which is basically all kids eat for free, or most of their schools eat for free, those kids were used to getting that free meal and going through the line or having that meal delivered. And so some of those districts actually saw profit this year because there were more meals being served, or the delivery of meals. There were certain districts that took on significant delivery options, and those saw profits. But across the board, there was a wide variance in how profitable or how big of a loss the Child Nutrition Fund operated in. And it really came down to a lot of it was just based on your previous free and reduced percentages. Any other questions there? Behind that, Exhibit 9 is a cash flow statement. Your previous makeup of cash versus investments were heavily in the investments. You actually sold $3.8 million of investments this year. That's one of the bigger numbers on this cash flow statement. But really, like I said, all in all, you paid off that $990,000 payable and lost $1 million from operations. After those statements, there's 40 pages of footnotes that goes into detail of all of your assets and liabilities, 10 pages of information on those pension plan and retirement health benefits, information on the actuarial studies that calculate your little portion of that giant liability, which still is a giant liability, even for you. Even at 1.5% of the state liability, it's a massive number. Luckily, the actual pension plan is about a 89% funded plan, and the retirement health benefit plan is just marginally funded at 3 or 4%. So that's a massive state liability, but you have to record your 1.5% of that directly on these statements. The next section I wanted to point to is the second part of our audit, which is a compliance audit. On page 63 starts some letters. These are basically opinion letters, just like on page 1. Page 63 starts 3 letters. One of them is on internal controls over compliance and financial reporting. That indicated no material weaknesses on financial reporting or compliance. The second letter is on compliance with federal program requirements for your major federal programs. And this year we had to audit both of those COVID funds, the coronavirus relief funds and the education and stabilization funds. And we also audited your special education cluster as your major federal programs. Those 3 programs in this letter indicate that there were no findings or question costs related to those 3 federal programs. The third letter is a letter on your state compliance requirements. And this one reads a little different than previous years. We did have one finding on your state public school fund. And that is indicated in this letter and is also indicated under the findings and question costs on page
70.
Starting on page 70. The real information is mostly on page 71. So every year, the State Public School Fund funds the majority of teacher salaries and a lot of other salaries based on positions. Instead of giving you, here's $40 million for teachers, they give you, here's 40,000 positions. And so at the end of the year, this is always a moving target of who qualifies for what position and trying to maximize and utilize every single position. And sometimes you use more than you're supposed to. And that's not a bad thing. That means you left no money on the table. This year, the using of positions was just, you went a little too high in the negative. You used 16 extra position days, and we're talking 16 out of thousands of days. But it was just a little higher than normal. So you had to pay back essentially $60,000 or so for these overused positions. These are positions that you would have had to pay out of local anyway. So it's not like any dollars were lost, but it is still a compliance finding in regards to the state compliance supplements that are sent out. You also had $40,000 of salary exceptions outstanding at year end. Again, this is a moving target. There is a constant list of whether it's individuals who are coded incorrectly or just mistakes in coding, number differences, also disputes or tracking down the latest and greatest license from a person. There's a multitude of reasons for these salaries exceptions. And at year end, it's a matter of clearing those and putting people in the right buckets and paying people out of the right buckets, so is that your number of salary exceptions at year end is minimal. And again, this year was just a little higher than normal, 44,000. Again, you're always going to have salary exceptions, just a little higher than normal. I equate both of these findings to, and it's in here, you undertook the beginning stages of a system conversion that is being pushed by DPI, and it will eventually be required by DPI for all school boards. You are the first district to convert to this new system, and that is a huge time constraint on finance. The account numbers, the 16-digit account numbers that they're used to seeing are now becoming a 25-digit account number for no reason at all, unless, I don't understand programming, but and just the amount of attention required by finance to convert software systems, again, is a major undertaking, and I think limited finances time at year end to put towards clearing some of these. And again, when you're talking about a moving target, especially during a pandemic where there is constant changes to funding sources, constant changes to rules about how you can spend these funds, I think it just, again, got a little larger than normal. So required to show that as a finding, but I, again, by no means think that this is some inherent problem in finance. So any questions about the finding or about the compliance? This year is a heavy state compliance. We have to audit the state public school fund every year because it's your major source of funding, but we also audited the
Before you move on, I have a
yes.
quick question. Sometimes I'm a coach,
Mm-hmm.
and then sometimes, we get these speeches that you are a little off today, little Johnny, or whatever, but it cost us the game. That's not what you're talking about with these findings, though, right?
That's right.
I just want to be absolutely clear because people are listening.
Yes.
And you did a good job, and I just want folks to know that we're in no financial trouble or jeopardy. You're just pointing out things that happened with us as far as the auditing process is concerned.
That's right. These findings don't represent dollars lost because of the nature, because you overused your positions, you had to pay back funds from local, after June 30 that you would have paid before June 30. This is really a timing issue. These things just got cleared up after year end, so they cross over year end and become findings. These salaries exceptions, if they had been cleared before, they would have resulted in payments from local to state prior to June 30, but instead they happened after June 30. So again, the question costs are questionable costs as of June 30, 2021, but it's not true dollars lost. It really is a timing.
It's not,
Thank you.
It's not a big deal. It just has to be reported. And on 72 is what we're going to do to make sure
Absolutely.
it doesn't happen next year.
Yeah, absolutely.
Kind of thing,
yes.
right? Yeah.
Yep. Yeah. There is a management's plan
Yep.
agreed to by management, like you said, on page 72. And again, these things happen. These requirements happen every year. We have a reporting threshold of like $25,000, and this just exceeded that.
Right.
And again,
I just want the public to hear that
absolutely.
in a declarative and definitive manner, because people can run when they should be walking.
And Ms. McClam, and I thank you for bringing up the conversion, because I know that the finance staff and Mrs. McClam have had a hard year getting all that stuff done between our very old accounting system and our payroll system. So I know that they've been working really hard and throw in all the federal money and everything else that's going on that we have to keep track of as well. So
Yeah,
I'm
absolutely.
glad that they're doing a good job.
The software you're converting to, you were not supposed to be the first one. The previous
I know.
first district backed out because the product wasn't ready and the time constraints put on by finance to help the actual software company with the conversion. So again, it is between pandemic conversion. It's this is a foul ball. It's not the game.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Yeah. And that's really all I have. I appreciate your time. Again, a really positive audit report. I think really most important part is the general fund balance addition. That was much needed. You were desperately low 2 years ago, and this actually helps. You see, one decision on a supplement is a $3 million decision. So having an extra $10 million in the bank is not unusual or unnecessary. So.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that. A huge shout out to Shauna and her staff. That's great. It's good to hear.
Huge shout out.
What? Yes. Echoing my yes. Thank you.
Yeah.
And thank you for coming. We appreciate
Yep.
it.
Thank you.
Thanks. Next up is the COVID-19 update. Mr. McCraw.
Thank you, Ms. Heintel. Good evening again, board members. Dr. Houlihan. I come to you tonight with the January the 11th, 2022 COVID update. The goal of UCPS continues to be to keep our students and our staff healthy and safe while keeping them in our school buildings and in their departments. We continue to meet with Health Director Dennis Joyner and his staff, and when I say we, myself and our nursing supervisors, we meet at least twice a week with Mr. Joyner and his staff to review COVID data. We also monitor COVID data in Union County and North Carolina, and we look at what impacts UCPS as a whole. So here are a few numbers. I'm not going to give you a lot of numbers tonight, but just a few numbers about COVID data for Union County. First number today, the COVID positivity rate is 32.7% as of this morning when we received that update. The 7-day average for new cases of COVID per day is 474.3 cases per day. Hospitalizations at Atrium Union continue to be high, but they're not as high as they've been at some points of the pandemic. So they are high. We have in UCPS observed a sharp increase in the positive cases reported by students and staff. We all know that. We mirror what's going on in our community, and we're seeing a sharp increase. More positive case, of course, they result in more students and staff being isolated and excluded and quarantined. So more positive cases, the more people you'll have that are isolated, excluded, and quarantined. How about our nurses and our school staff? They're doing an exceptional job in the midst of this. And I want to give all of our staff members a shout out, especially our school nurses. They're working hard. School nurses and staff are prioritizing positive cases and symptomatic cases. We continue to look at the people who are deemed close contacts to positive cases, but we do have to prioritize positive cases and symptomatic people. UCPS COVID dashboard is no longer published as of January 7th. I'm letting the public know that they can refer to the Union County Public Health website for the most up-to-date data on county. The state of North Carolina has a website and dashboard, and then also the CDC has a website as well. We will communicate to families every time we have a positive, impactful case at a school. What does that mean? If there's a positive case at Antioch Elementary School today, those parents would receive communication this afternoon or evening about the positive case. So we continue to do that. So a little extra tonight, I want to update you on the Strong Schools NC Public Health Toolkit. The last update came out last night. Yeah, I had January 7th in here. I did not receive the update from DHHS, so January 10th is the last update. I just looked. A couple of things I want to update you on is the new 5-day isolation and quarantine guidance. Our local health director, we talked with him. They did adopt that guidance once it came out from CDC, and then in turn it came out in the Strong Schools Toolkit. So the updated guidance changes how long and under what conditions staff and students need to be excluded from school or from work because they have a positive test or they've been exposed to COVID-19. So the first thing it says, staff and students with symptoms, regardless of vaccination status, should isolate and get tested if possible. If testing is not possible, follow the guidance that I'm going to talk about here in just a few minutes. So we do realize, though, testing is limited at this time. It is difficult to get the same day. You sometimes have to search for testing throughout our county, throughout our region. So the first thing I'm going to talk about is isolation. So if a staff or student test positive, regardless of vaccination status, and they do not have symptoms, the guidance is they should isolate for 5 days. Then they should wear a mask for the additional 5 days. I'm going to reiterate that. For the 6th up to the 10th day, the person returning should wear a mask when they return. If someone has symptoms, they should isolate from others until fever-free without fever-reducing medicine and symptoms are improving. Individuals should also isolate for at least 5 days since symptoms began, and then wear a mask for the additional 5 days. Reiterate again, they should wear a mask. So let's talk about quarantine now. Isolation was the first, quarantine's next. So if you're exposed to a positive person, if you're not vaccinated, you should stay away from others for 5 days, get tested if possible, and return to school while wearing a mask for 5 additional days. 6th to the 10th day, you should wear a mask, staff or students. If you're vaccinated and eligible for the booster but not yet been boosted, you should stay away from others for 5 days. Get tested if possible and return to school while wearing a mask for 5 additional days. If you're fully vaccinated and you've received a booster, or you're not eligible for a booster, you do not need to quarantine or stay away from others, but the guidance is that you should wear a mask for the 10 days. That is coming from the toolkit. One change that we all noticed that we made our stakeholders aware of, positive antibody tests are no longer in the toolkit. That was removed. So that means they are no longer accepted. We did make our parents aware of that. Our staff members do not get an antibody test because it's not accepted under the new toolkit. One thing that was added back on January 7th, if a person is exposed to a COVID positive person and they have had a COVID positive test within the last 90 days, the person is exempt and does not need to quarantine. Originally, when the first toolkit was updated, that was taken out. That was added back on January 7th. So I'm going to summarize. Union County and UCPS as a whole, we are experiencing a sharp increase in COVID positive cases. UCPS staff, we're closely monitoring conditions in each school, in each department, and across Union County. We're working with our health director. We work with our staff. We work with our nursing team. We monitor that daily and multiple times a day. This does include the positive case totals, the exclusions, isolations, and quarantines, and staffing or the operational impact on UCPS schools and UCPS departments. That would include transportation, that would include custodial, that would include child nutrition services. We are hopeful that improvements will be observed over the next few weeks. In our talks with Mr. Joyner, most countries have seen a very sharp increase with this Omicron variant. And then after a month or two, then they see a sharp decrease. And that's what the hopes are. We've not observed that yet, but that's what our hopes are. The next time I come to you, I hope we see a decrease. This is my COVID update for this evening. I appreciate you letting me present it to you. Are there questions about the information I presented?
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Oh, wait, sorry, go ahead.
Mr. McGraw, I have a question in regard to the discontinuing of the dashboard. Whose decision was that and why did we discontinue it?
Reverend Kirkpatrick, we looked at that as a staff with the new updates to the toolkit with the 5-day isolation and quarantine requirements. It became more difficult to accurately track all those numbers because you have students rolling in and staff rolling in and out so often. Yes, so we want to put out the best information we can. And as far as isolations and exclusions, it became more difficult to say that number is exactly. We can give you an idea of what we believe is going to be isolated or excluded, but with the 5 days, it's a rolling number constantly. Okay. So I hope that helps.
Yes, sir. Also, I think we all could have we all predicted for the most part that after coming back from Christmas break that we were going to be sitting here having this discussion. And I think we could have been a little more prepared for it. What are some steps, because I know you mentioned a few moments ago about it's supposed to decline or what have you, but because it is science and because it's unpredictable, that it can be just like a roller coaster where it's down today and up tomorrow. What are some precautions that you and your staff are looking to put in place, because a day can make a huge difference? What are some things that you guys are looking to do to put in place so that, because we don't know if another variant is going to come about or what have you, we just don't know. The times that we're living in, we do not know, again, what tomorrow is going to look like. So what are some things that you guys are looking to put in place from a weekend that may be 4 weekends, 4 days, excuse me, a long, lengthy weekend, or a holiday or what have you in the future, so that we can attack it more effectively than we have right now.
Yeah, I think we learned a lot from the winter, Christmas, New Year's break of 2021. Is that right? No, I'm sorry, 2020. We learned that we have to keep our nursing staff in place over the break. So when I say the nursing staff, we utilized 8 to 10 nurses each day of the break to make sure that we stayed up to date on positive cases, on any kinds of reports of COVID. We kept our COVID helpline open. So as far as being proactive for December, the 1st of January of 2021 going into 22, we did change our approach. We learned from that 2020 winter break, Christmas break. So we did learn that. I think the public can help us too, Reverend Kirkpatrick. They need to be aware that if they are positive or symptomatic, stay home. Don't come to school or work. I think our public has learned a lot. I think we've done a great job of educating through our communications department, of educating our families, our students, our staff about proper protocols to put in place. So over 2 years now, we've learned a lot about the preventive measures that we need to put in place. So keeping our staff in place, staying ahead of the curve, not letting positive cases build up over a long break. That's one thing. Communication with our stakeholders, I think that's another thing. And then also the public can help us by staying home if they're sick, symptomatic, just with any illness. But we did anticipate an uptick. I've talked to several of you, and Dr. Houlihan and I talk hourly. He talks to me more than he wants to about COVID, but we keep him up to date about every step we're taking. We have to monitor schools, departments now to make sure operationally we're not being impacted. But we've learned a lot as a staff about staying ahead of things. Even though you should, COVID was brand new to all of us. So we've learned a lot. So does that help answer your question?
It does. Thank you.
Thank you.
I think you just made a really good point right there too. So you're in constant communication with the principals, with all of central office, with Dr. Houlihan. You're looking at each school on a case-by-case basis. So there's no like magic number that's out there that says if you hit this percentage, each time you're conversing with those principals about staff outages and whatnot. I mean, that is taken on a case-by-case basis and assessed, and you're given the local perspective from that school, right?
Yes, sir, Mr. Moriel. When we originally went into the pandemic back in 2020, we thought there was going to be a magic number, 1, 2 positive cases, but that did not turn out to be the case. We have to look at positive cases. We have to look at the number of isolations, exclusions. We have to look at the operational impact, maybe the biggest thing we have to look at. So each school has a different, there's not a certain ratio, there's not a certain percentage. We try to keep it isolated to the person who's positive and the people who need to be excluded. Classroom level would be next, grade level. Ultimately, a school may need to be paused or go to a virtual setting for a certain period of time to let things get better. We've done that in the past. We've not had to do that this school year. We've done a good job of managing it. But I think the public needs to understand we try to minimize the impact on a school as much as we can, but they have to understand there may be a time we have to pause a classroom, school, and we keep it as small as we can. So.
And you made a great point earlier too. So health and safety, obviously number one concern, but you're also considering, are the students still learning, right? Is the environment conducive to learning? And when it gets to a point where it's not, that's where a decision would be made to go virtual, correct?
We do. If we don't have enough staffing to adequately continue our operations, we would have to talk with Dr. Houlihan. That would be Dr. Harris and Dr. Breedlove and myself. We also would consult public health on that as well, but we would ultimately talk with Dr. Houlihan about what is the best to continue learning either at the school or in a virtual setting.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Go ahead. Go ahead, please.
Thank you, Gary. Concerning the dashboard, I really like the fact that what I consider now a greater working relationship with county health department. And when you shared with us that the dashboard would be coming down and that the county would be publishing the dashboard, if anybody, because I heard several times tonight, people, people have a right to say how they want to say whatever they say. And but they phrased it as we took it down or we discontinued it, when in fact all we've done is, because one of the issues we had early on, that we were doing the county's job. So literally now the county is publishing the dashboard. And when you sent us how to assess that, I did that. And it really is interactive, because you can go from the county, you can go to the state, you can go to the CDC, you can get all the data that you want. So I just want the citizens to know that accessibility to numbers from a dashboard perspective is still readily available.
Yeah, there are numbers available, as Reverend mentioned. As you said, the county's dashboard is excellent. It's an excellent resource. Now, they do not publish the number of positive cases at a certain school, but they do have positive cases by age group. Usually, I think it's 0 to 17. They do not have just isolations and exclusions for schools, but you can refer to that website for lots of good information, as you said. I think the concern, as I told Reverend Kirkpatrick, is with the new 5-day quarantine, isolation, exclusion guidelines, those numbers are just rotating so much. I want to make sure I give the public the most accurate information, which can be found on Union County's website. It can be found on CDC and the state's website.
No, I'm with you.
Yes, sir.
No, I'm with you. What you just said was good, but not necessary, because you by pointing to the county dashboard, that data is readily available.
Yes, sir.
For any citizen.
Yes, sir.
And I saw that they had the age breakdown. So obviously, if you're interested in school-age children, you look for that
That is
age.
correct.
So the ability to get dashboard type information is there, because we're now working more with the entity, the county health department, that should have been the lead dog on this anyway.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Let me just double down on the comment about discontinuing the dashboard. If the changes in quarantine, basically shortening the period from 10 to 5. So if you're putting out a dashboard on Friday, that information's already old, because like you said, things are moving so fast. So it's not an accurate snapshot of what's happening, because the movement is so much quicker because of people coming on and coming off. The other thing I wanted to address, there have been a lot of comments about X number of teachers out at a particular school. How are we going to teach these kids? They're going to be stuck in a gym or a cafeteria. And I don't know if you want to chime in on this, Dr. Houlihan, but basically some information. Staff has prepared contingency plans if we need to pull in licensed and prepared staff to assist a school, a class, what have you, to fill in because of a spike in absences due to staff being out for sickness. We have a contingency plan in place to address that need. Do you want to jump on that?
That is correct. Between Dr. Harris, Dr. Breedlove, and Mr. McGraw, anytime that we have a school that we have a very high level of concern with, we have employees that have been identified on the academic and the non-academic end that can go in to provide supervision, that can provide teaching, that can continue learning. Our ultimate goal is to keep schools open. I firmly believe that's where our kids need to be. And we will move to a remote learning environment as a very last resort. But we're having an all hands on deck approach with this. We want to make sure our kids can consistently stay in school. I even told Mr. Moore in our meeting on Monday, listen, if we need help with serving lunches to kids at school or wiping down tables, I mean, even our cabinet staff is going to jump in to help out. Again, on the academic and the non-academic, we do have contingency plans. Once those plans are exhausted, then we have to have a different conversation. But we are not there yet at all in any one of our schools.
So if I may, when do we determine that plan needs to be implemented?
That would be based on a number of varied factors that would have to come from the three gentlemen I mentioned earlier, based on the principal's assessment of conditions in their school, safety, any safety concerns or challenges, any academic concerns or challenges, and any operational staff on the non-academic challenges. Once all four of those kind of ingredients come together, that's when our team makes an educated decision as to when we need to enact a different plan and for whatever amount of time that might be needed. That is, and what I say, a plan, that is certainly not a long-term sustainable plan. That's more of a plan to get us to a certain outcome or a certain number of days until we can have staff return.
Okay, thank you, Mr. McCraw.
Thank you all.
Thank you. Next up is the review of face covering policy pursuant to Session Law 2021-130.
Madam
Chair.
Chairman, I'd like to make a motion that we, UCPS, maintain its mask optional environment.
Second.
Was that a second?
Yeah, second.
Okay. All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? 8-1, or sorry, 7-1. Correct. Okay. Next up is policies for review. Mrs. Morris.
Yes, good evening. And I'm only going to talk about or address A, B, C, and D. Those are 4 policies that are for your review this evening. They went to the policy committee last month, and if there's any questions on any of those, I'm glad to answer those.
Okay, seeing no questions. 10E is policy 4-13, student assignment.
Madam Chair, given concern that there will be seats at special program schools available once current student applications are processed, I request that we revise policy 4-13, student assignment. Motion 1, giving the time frame, I move that we bypass our usual procedure and fast track the proposed revision to policy 4-13.
Second.
Second.
Aye.
I move that we add the following language pursuant to the draft policy included in the meeting materials. Otherwise eligible students that are not enrolled and attending a Union County public school will be able to complete the prospective enrollment process. Once the prospective enrollment process is complete, the student will be eligible to apply for a lottery, filling any open seats after the initial lottery is run.
Aye.
Good luck to all the high school students on their finals. I know at the Sides House, we're halfway through, keeping our fingers crossed on the math 1 we took today, but good luck to everybody else on the rest of your finals.
And happy new year to everybody and continued success throughout the rest of the school, this semester and the school year.
Thank you to all our staff. Really appreciate everyone. Anybody else? So next is announcements, board members.
Madam Chair, the Strategic Planning, Information Technology, and Transportation Committee meeting will be held January 26th at 7:30 here at the PDC.
The curriculum committee meeting will meet on the 20th at 10 a.m. in this very room.
Policy will meet on the 18th at 8 o'clock via Zoom.
The finance committee will,
Go ahead.
go ahead.
Finance will meet at 8 a.m. on the 25th. And is that virtual?
Zoom.
Via Zoom.
The Facilities Committee will meet on the 26th at 9 a.m. at the PDC. Does anyone have any else?
The NAACP is having an educational forum on January the 24th, which is a Monday, I believe at 6:30. Myself,
Was it
Reverend
6:30
Benchen,
or 5:30?
5:30, excuse me. Thank you, Reverend Benchen. Myself, Reverend Benchen, as well as Chair Lady Melissa Merrill will be on the panel. So if you're interested in attending, I believe you have to RSVP. You can also be in attendance physically, or you can Zoom, and you can also send in your questions if you have those for the panelists on that day.
Did you say
It's
the
at the
20
Armory, right? Still?
The Armory, yes, the old Armory.
24th?
The 24th, yes. I think it's at 5:30, yes.
Anything else? If not, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So move.
Second.
Aye.